my wife and her childhood best friend, who's also her lawyer, siphoned off $250, $0 of our savings to fund a secret house flip, and now she's trying to legally claim half the property I inherited from my grandfather. What's worse is I just found out she was planning to leave me after the probate was settled. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the type to catch my wife cheating on me, especially not in a way that would blow up my entire world. But here I am, sitting in my living room, staring at the evidence I found by accident, and it's like my entire sense of reality just shattered. It started with little things, her phone ringing at odd hours, her suddenly being busy with work, and her brushing off my concerns with that bitchy, dismissive attitude she always had when she didn't want to talk about something. Her name's Lisa. We'd been married for 5 years, and honestly, I thought we had a decent life. She was always a little high maintenance, demanding, and her attitude could turn icy at the drop of a hat, but I loved her. Or at least I thought I did. But the signs were there. She'd been acting secretive about her phone, hiding texts, and I caught her deleting messages more than once. I didn't want to believe it, so I brushed it off as paranoia or her just being stressed about her job. Then came the night I found the proof. I was looking for my wallet in her purse because I needed to grab some cash for a meeting, and I noticed her phone was unlocked on the table. I figured I'd just check quick. I know, that's a breach of privacy, but I was desperate for some clarity. What I saw was a string of texts with her lawyer Mark and some guy named Jason. The messages weren't just about legal stuff. They were about meeting up, making plans, and frankly, they sounded pretty intimate. The way she talked about Jason like he was hot, and how she couldn't wait to see him again made my stomach turn. I kept digging. I found out that she'd been seeing Jason for months, maybe longer, behind my back. And the worst part, I stumbled upon receipts for a hotel room paid for with our joint account. That's when I realized she was cheating on me, not just emotionally but physically. She'd been lying to my face about everything, playing the perfect wife while she was secretly sneaking around with her lawyer's client. I felt sick. Betrayal doesn't even cover it. It was like I was living with a stranger. I thought I knew her, but I didn't. I was furious, hurt, and confused all at once. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I could have been so blind. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the fact that she was planning to leave me once the probate on my grandfather's house was settled. She'd been talking about divorcing me, about moving on, as if I was just some obstacle in her life, not someone she was supposed to love. And then there was the money. Turns out she and her childhood best friend, who's also her lawyer, siphoned off $250, $0 of our savings to fund some secret house flip. I found out about that through some legal documents. She'd been lying about the money, telling me she was investing it, but I now know she was funneling it into some shady project with her friend. All the while, she kept insisting she was doing what's best for us, even as she was secretly planning her escape. That's when the anger really started to boil over. I realized I'd been a fool. I gave her my trust, my love, my money. Hell, I even gave her my future, and she was just using me. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I needed a plan. I couldn't just let her walk away with everything, especially not after I'd discovered she was trying to claim half the property I inherited from my grandfather. That house was supposed to be my safety net, my future. Now she was trying to take it all, using the legal system to her advantage. I sat there, clutching the phone with the incriminating messages, trying to process everything. I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My wife, Lisa, had turned into a stranger, a liar, a cheat, and a thief. And I had no idea how I was going to get out of this mess or how I was going to rebuild my life after something like this. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going down without a fight. The next day was a whirlwind. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her smile, the way she used to look at me like I was her world. Now I knew that was Alla. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I had trusted her with everything, and she'd been secretly planning her escape, not just emotionally but financially too. I knew I had to act fast. The first thing I did was dig into our joint bank accounts, credit cards, everything I could find. I needed to understand the full scope of her deception. Sure enough, I found multiple transfers to her lawyer's account, and the records of the $250, $0 she and her friend, Mark, had siphoned off. It was gone into some shady house flip project that she'd kept hidden from me. They'd lied about the money, pretending it was for investments, but I knew better now. It was for her own gain, and she'd been planning to leave me high and dry once she had her new life set. I also pulled up the legal documents from the probate case. That's when I saw her plans to claim half the property I inherited from my grandfather. That house was not just a piece of land. It was my inheritance, my connection to my family's history. And she was trying to stake her claim on it as if it was hers. I knew she had no right, but she was banking on the legal system being on her side. Her lawyer, Mark, was helping her craft the perfect argument. I felt sick thinking about her lying to my face for months, all while plotting her next move. And I couldn't help but wonder, how long had this been going on? Was I just blind, or did I ignore the signs because I didn't want to believe the worst? Every thought spun in my mind, fueling my anger and confusion. I remembered the nights she'd be out late, the secretive phone calls, the excuses she'd give when I asked about her whereabouts. She'd always had a quick answer, a dismissive laugh, or a bitchy remark that shut me down. I decided I needed to confront her face to face, not just to get answers, but to see if there was any remorse or if she'd try to deny everything. I called her at work, told her I wanted to meet. She sounded irritated, like I was bothering her. That's when she threw her usual line, "You're overreacting, Jason. You don't have any proof. You're just paranoid. I work hard for this marriage and I deserve some respect." But I wasn't buying it anymore. I had proof and I was done with her lies. When she arrived that evening, her face was smug, like she knew she had the upper hand. I laid the evidence on the table, screenshots, bank records, the legal documents, and watched her face drain of color. She tried to spin it, said I was misunderstanding, that she was doing this for us, that the house flip was just a hobby, a way to secure our future. She told me she loved me, that everything was a mistake, that she'd never cheat or steal from me. But her words rang hollow. I could see the guilt behind her eyes, the panic in her voice. I asked her outright, "Are you leaving me? Are you planning to take everything and walk away?" Her denial was almost cartoonish. "Jason, you're crazy. I would never do that. You're just jealous, insecure, and paranoid. This is all just a misunderstanding, I swear." But I knew better. I knew the truth was staring me in the face. She was planning her escape, and she'd been lying to my face all along. The emotional blow hit me hard. I felt like I was drowning. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted with my life, was capable of this level of deception. It was like she'd been living a double life, one as my wife, the other as a schemer, a thief, and a liar. I wanted to lash out, to yell, to demand she tell me the truth, but I also knew that wouldn't help. I had to stay calm, gather my thoughts, and prepare for what was coming next. The hardest part was realizing I wasn't just betrayed emotionally. I was betrayed financially, legally, and personally. Our entire life together was built on her lies, and I had to figure out how to stop her from taking everything I had left, especially that inheritance. I knew I couldn't just let her walk away with half of my grandfather's house, not after everything. That was my family's legacy, and I was determined to keep it out of her grasp. The night ended with her storming out, furious, and shouting that I was overreacting, that I was ruining everything, that I'd regret this. But I knew deep down that I couldn't go back to the way things were. Not after finding out she'd been cheating, stealing, and planning to leave me. I had no choice but to face the reality that my marriage was over, and I had to start figuring out how to protect myself, my property, and my future. Over the next few days, I threw myself into action. I couldn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself or letting her manipulate the situation. I reached out to a lawyer, someone who specialized in property and family law. I needed to understand my rights, especially about the inheritance and how to prevent her from claiming half of the house. The lawyer, a sharp guy named David, listened carefully and then told me what I already suspected. Legally, I was in a strong position to defend my inheritance, especially since I had clear documentation proving it was mine before her involvement. But that didn't mean it would be easy. She had her lawyer, Mark, and I knew she'd do everything to spin the story in her favor. I also found out that she had been secretly working with Mark to draw up papers to claim half the property once the probate was settled. That was the part that made my blood boil. She was planning to use the legal system to steal what was rightfully mine, all while pretending to be the loving wife. I started collecting every piece of evidence I could find: texts, emails, bank statements, anything that showed her scheme. I even reached out to some of her friends, people she confided in, to see if I could get more insight into her plans. Most of them didn't know the full story, but a couple hinted that she'd been acting strange lately, more aggressive, more secretive. I kept thinking about her lying to me, her bitchy attitude whenever I questioned her, and her quick, dismissive responses. She'd always had a way of making me feel like I was overreacting or paranoid, but now I knew the truth. She'd been lying all along. One night I confronted her again. I told her I knew about her affair, about the money she stole, and about her plans to leave me. Her reaction was classic. She tried to deny everything, said I was just jealous and insecure. She called me paranoid, crazy, and said I was ruining our marriage over nothing. But I had the evidence now, and I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into backing down. I told her if she wanted to leave, she'd have to do it legally, and she'd have to answer for what she'd done. That's when she snapped. She started yelling, calling me controlling, insecure, and accused me of spying on her. She said I was ruining her life, that she'd been unhappy for a long time, and that I was the reason. But I wasn't listening anymore. I had reached my breaking point. I told her I was going to fight for what was mine, my inheritance, my property, my dignity. I wasn't going to let her walk away with half our savings or the house or anything else she was trying to claim. I also made the decision to freeze all joint accounts and credit cards. If she thought she could siphon off money and then just walk away, she was dead wrong. I contacted my bank, explained the situation, and put a hold on large transfers. I wanted to make sure she couldn't just drain everything while I was left clueless. It was a small step, but I knew it was necessary. I had to protect what was left of my life savings, especially after discovering that she and her lawyer had already taken so much. I felt a strange mixture of anger and relief. Anger because she'd betrayed me so completely, and relief because I finally had some clarity. I knew now that I couldn't trust her anymore. Not with my heart, not with my money, not with my future. But I also knew I had to keep my cool, stay strategic, and prepare for the legal fight ahead. I couldn't let her manipulate the system, and I couldn't let her walk away with my inheritance. If she thought she could use her lawyer to steal from me, she was badly mistaken. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I'd been a fool to trust her so blindly. I'd given her everything, my love, my money, my future, and she just used me. I had no choice but to fight back for myself and for what my family left me. I knew this was only the beginning and I'd have to be ready for whatever she threw at me next. But I also knew one thing: I wasn't going down without a fight. Not this time. The legal battle started almost immediately after I gathered enough evidence to show she had been scheming behind my back. I hired a lawyer, David, and he helped me prepare everything needed to fight her claim on the property and to recover the money she and her friend, Mark, had siphoned off. It was clear she was trying to manipulate the system, but I also knew I had the law on my side if I played my cards right. Still, it wasn't going to be easy. She had her lawyer, and she was already spinning stories to make herself look like the victim. The first court hearing was a nightmare. She arrived dressed to impress, with that bitchy smirk on her face, acting like she was the innocent wife. She everything said she'd never cheated, never stolen money, and that I was just paranoid. Her lawyer argued that the property was a joint asset acquired during our marriage, and that she had a right to half of it. She also claimed that the money she and Mark took was an investment, meant to help us build a better future. I couldn't believe she was trying to spin it that way, after I had all the receipts showing otherwise. During the hearing, I sat there trying to keep my composure while she played her victim card. She said I was controlling and insecure, that I'd been suspicious for no reason. I wanted to scream, but I knew that wouldn't help. Instead, I presented all the evidence I'd collected, screenshots of her messages, bank transfer records, the receipts for the hotel, everything that proved she'd been lying. I also brought in a witness, her best friend, Sarah, who reluctantly confirmed that Lisa had been secretive about her plans and that she'd seen her with Jason, the guy she'd been cheating with. Seeing her squirm under the weight of the evidence was satisfying, but I knew it wasn't over. She was a master at twisting words, and I could tell she was already plotting her next move. Her lawyer kept pushing for a settlement, trying to get me to agree to a quick deal, half the property, some money, and she'd leave me alone. But I wasn't giving her anything. Not after everything I'd found out. I told the court I intended to fight for my inheritance and to recover the stolen money. The emotional toll was heavy. Sitting there knowing she was lying through her teeth, pretending to be innocent, made me feel sick. I kept asking myself how I got here, how I trusted her, how I missed all the signs. But I also knew I couldn't dwell on the past. I had to focus on the future. I realized that my marriage was over, but I still had to protect what was mine, my house, my money, my dignity. After the hearing, I felt drained but somewhat hopeful. The judge ordered a temporary injunction to prevent her from selling or claiming ownership of the property until the case was resolved. That was a small victory, but I knew it was only a matter of time before she tried to find other ways to manipulate the situation. I also learned that I could file for a court-ordered accounting of the money she took, which would help me recover some of the stolen funds. In the meantime, I kept collecting evidence, talking to financial advisors, and preparing for the long legal fight ahead. I knew she wasn't going to give up easily. She was stubborn, manipulative, and used to getting her way. But I was determined not to let her win. She'd betrayed me deeply, but I wasn't going to be her victim. I had to stand my ground for myself and for my future. That night, I sat alone in the quiet of my apartment, staring at the legal documents spread out on my desk. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd lost: trust, stability, the woman I loved. But I also felt a flicker of strength. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I wasn't defeated. I realized I had to rebuild from this, to learn how to trust again, and most importantly, to never let someone take everything from me without a fight. I knew this was just the beginning of a long road, but I also knew I wasn't going to give up. Not now, not ever. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings, sleepless nights, and emotional exhaustion. Every day brought new surprises, mostly unpleasant. Lisa, true to her manipulative nature, doubled down on her efforts to spin the story her way. She started claiming I was abusive, controlling, and that I was trying to sabotage her. I couldn't believe her audacity. She was the one sneaking around, stealing money and planning her escape, yet she had the nerve to paint herself as the victim. Her lawyer, Mark, kept pushing for a quick settlement, offering her a deal that would give her a chunk of the house and some money in exchange for dropping her claims. I refused every time. I knew she was trying to buy her way out, but I wasn't interested in her dirty money or her lies. I wanted the house, the inheritance, and the money she stole back. I also wanted her to be held accountable for her actions. Meanwhile, I managed to get a court order for an audit of our joint accounts and her personal accounts. The accountant uncovered more transactions, more siphoned money, and some suspicious transfers to offshore accounts. It was clear she'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. Every new piece of evidence made me angrier, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I saw how she'd been using her charm and bitchy attitude to manipulate everyone around her, including me. One day, I decided to confront her again, this time face to face with all the evidence laid out on the table. I told her I knew about her affair, the money she stole, and her plans to leave. She looked surprised at first, then angry, then dismissive. She spat out some lies, saying she was doing all this for us, that I was just insecure, that I was ruining everything. I looked her in the eyes and told her I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I said I was going to fight her for everything she tried to steal, and I meant it. That night, I made the decision to take control of the situation. I filed for a court order to freeze her assets and prevent her from selling or transferring the house. I also contacted the probate court to notify them of her attempt to claim half the estate. I wanted to make sure she couldn't just walk away with my inheritance like she'd planned. I also started working on a detailed timeline of all her actions, every lie, every transaction, so I'd have everything ready for the next court date. The most unsettling part was realizing how much I'd been blind. I'd given her everything, my trust, my money, my future, and she'd been plotting her escape right under my nose. It was a hard lesson in not taking trust for granted. But I also knew that I had to be strong, that I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I had to stand firm, protect what was mine, and fight for my rights. I spent a lot of time reflecting, trying to understand how I got here. Was I simply naive? Did I ignore the signs, or had I been too comfortable, too trusting? I don't have all the answers, but I do know one thing. I'm not going to let her control me anymore. I'm done being the victim in this story. I've started to rebuild my life piece by piece, and I'm determined to come out of this stronger. The legal process is slow, and I know she's going to keep trying to manipulate her way out of it. But I also know I have the truth on my side. I've learned that betrayal can come from the people you trust the most, and sometimes love isn't enough to keep things together. But resilience, awareness, and standing your ground, that's what gets you through. I'm not in a place where I can forgive her yet, but I am in a place where I can fight for what's rightfully mine, and that's exactly what I intend to do. The court case dragged on for what felt like forever. Every time I thought I had a handle on things, Lisa and her lawyer would come up with some new tactic to delay or distort the truth. She kept insisting she was the victim, that I was the one controlling and paranoid. She painted herself as the wronged wife, betrayed by my accusations, all while trying to sway the judge with her bitchy attitude and fake tears. It was exhausting, but I knew I had to stay strong. I'd gathered enough evidence and I had a good team of lawyers backing me up. Finally, after months of legal battles, the judge made a ruling. It was a partial victory, but it was enough to send her into a frenzy. The court ordered her to pay back the stolen $250, $0, and they confirmed that I was the rightful owner of the property, with her having no legal claim to half of it. The judge also granted me a restraining order preventing her from selling or transferring the house until everything was settled. That was a huge relief. I finally felt like I was starting to regain control of my life. But the aftermath wasn't easy. Lisa, furious and humiliated, tried to fight back in her own way. She accused me publicly of all sorts of things: controlling, abusive, unfaithful. I knew she was just trying to save face, but it still hurt. The people around us, friends and family, didn't know the full story, and I felt betrayed by those who believed her lies. I kept my head down, focusing on rebuilding what I could, slowly but steadily. As I looked back on everything, I realized how much I'd learned. Trust is fragile, so fragile that it can shatter in an instant. Love isn't enough to hold a relationship together when betrayal, greed, and deception are involved. But resilience, clarity, and standing your ground, that's what gets you through. I also learned that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you. The house, my grandfather's house, is now fully mine again. I've started fixing it up, making it a place I can finally call my own without the weight of her lies hanging over me. I've cut ties with Lisa completely. It hurts to think about how everything turned out, but I know I'll be okay. I've found a new sense of strength. I know now what I'm willing to accept, and I won't let anyone steal my peace again. Looking back, I realize betrayal teaches you a lot about yourself. It forces you to confront your own weaknesses and strengths. I've learned to trust cautiously, to ask questions, and most importantly, to never ignore the signs of deception. I won't forget what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. I'll rebuild, I'll move on, and I'll make sure that next time I see the warning signs before they destroy everything. This whole ordeal has been a brutal lesson in resilience, but I'm proud that I stood my ground. I may have lost a lot, but I gained clarity and a new sense of independence. I hope anyone reading this who finds themselves in a similar situation remembers: don't ignore the signs, trust your instincts, and never let someone walk all over you. Your worth isn't measured by how much you tolerate. It's about standing up for yourself and fighting for what's right.